Well, hello, this is Jeff Short, and we are going to go through a brief summary of Wayne Grudem's article on why Christians, evangelicals, should vote for Donald Trump in the 2016 elections. Wayne Grudem is a theology professor. He was one of my professors at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School in Deerfield, Illinois, back in the late 80s, and I in fact attended church with him in Libertyville, Illinois, and I believe we joined that church the same day. And he would sit back in the pews of that church, and I would sit on the other side of the church, and I would often see him and his family attending, as well as I would see him around the campus of Trinity. And I have benefited greatly from his ministry. I bought his large volume, Systematic Theology, very well written and easy accessible theology, and I would encourage every one of you to get a hold of that Systematic Theology by Wayne Grudem. He's also articulated in a very clear and compelling way why men and women have different functions and roles in their callings by God, and why the egalitarian feminist vision for marriage is false. And he has gone into great detail, writing a book along with Pastor John Piper on that very issue. So he is a great theologian and great thinker. He is now residing down in Arizona and teaching down there at a seminary. And he took the time to write a letter, an open letter to Christians, an article on why they should vote for candidate Donald Trump. And he goes through some number of reasons. And I want to go through that article in detail because I want to ask a number of questions of Professor Grudem. I want to ask him some critical questions because I'm not specifically persuaded by his reasoning as to why Christians should flock to Donald Trump. Now, I've already given plenty of good reasons why an evangelical Christian should never, ever be caught dead voting for Hillary Clinton, the most pro-abortion candidate that this country has ever had, even more so than the current president, which is hard to do. But Hillary Clinton is even worse than the current president on abortion, and she is even more radical and has more connections and might even be more powerful in the negative direction if she were to become president. So we definitely want to not ever, ever, ever vote for Hillary Clinton. But that doesn't necessarily mean then, as Christians, we need to jump on the Donald Trump bandwagon. And Wayne Grudem is trying to explain to Christians that even though Donald Trump is a flawed candidate, he is still a good candidate. Well, that's what I want to raise some questions about, because in the past I've done some videos exposing Donald Trump as not even a good candidate. And just to summarize before I get into the main body of the article by Wayne Grudem, if you look at Donald Trump, he does not have any political experience. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, that's a great thing, that's a plus instead of a minus. Well, it might be in some instances, but if you're going to be working with members of Congress, if you're going to be speaking on behalf of the United States, it would really, really help to have at least some elected experience, some political experience, even if it were just the mayor of a small town or something, to go right into, from the business world into a big government position is really quite a stretch. Well, that's just one of the criticisms. I don't want to give all of my criticisms. I want to look at the article and take that point by point. So let's go into that article right now. Well, good afternoon. This is Pastor Jeff Short, and we are here with a review of the article by Wayne Grudem, Why Voting for Donald Trump is a Morally Good Choice. So Wayne Grudem, as I explained, is a theological professor in Arizona. He has many years of experience. I do respect his choices and his decisions, but I have to question why voting for Donald Trump is a morally good choice. So we're going to get into his article found on townhall.com, and we're going to look at his logic and reasoning. So let's get into the article. Some of my Christian friends, says the article, tell me they can't in good conscience vote for Donald Trump because when faced with a choice between the lesser of two evils, the morally right thing is to choose neither one. They recommend voting for a third party or write-in candidate. As a professor who has taught Christian ethics for 39 years, I think their analysis is incorrect, he says. Now that Trump has won the GOP nomination, I think voting for Trump is a morally good choice. That's a key phrase that we want to keep in mind. Professor Grudem thinks that voting for Trump is a morally good choice. So let's see how he goes to support that contention. As American citizens need patience with each other in this difficult political season, close friends are inevitably going to make different decisions about the election. We still need to respect each other and thank God that we live in a democracy with freedom to differ about politics. And we need to keep talking to each other because democratic societies function best when thoughtful citizens can calmly and patiently dialogue about the reasons for their differences. This is my contribution to that discussion. So I agree with him there in that paragraph. We do need to talk. We do need to be patient with one another and not just label each other, call names at each other. We need to actually listen and dialogue and find out what each other has to say. I do not think that voting for Donald Trump is morally an moral evil choice because there is nothing morally wrong with voting for a flawed candidate if you think he will do more good for the nation than his opponent. In fact, it is a morally right thing to do. So he says voting for Donald Trump is not a morally evil choice. Well, I would agree with that, and I don't know anyone that's actually saying that a vote for Donald Trump is a moral evil. I do know people that say that voting for Donald Trump is a bad decision or a foolish decision to empower a man who does not have experience on that level of playing field in world politics. But I don't know of anyone that says it's a morally evil choice. So I think he's maybe putting up a straw man here. I don't know of anybody that's saying it's a morally evil choice to vote for Donald Trump. They're usually saying, I don't like him, don't like what he stands for, and I'm having trouble casting a vote for him. Grudem goes on, I do not support Trump in the primary season. I even spoke against him at a pastor's conference in February, but now I plan to vote for him. I do not think it is right to call him an evil candidate. I think rather he is a good candidate with flaws. Well, I don't think it's right to call Donald Trump an evil candidate either, and I don't know anybody that has been calling him an evil candidate except maybe those on the far left or the people in the churches that are maybe confused or bought into a lot of the propaganda. But I don't think he's an evil candidate. I don't know people that think he's an evil candidate. But Wayne Grudem goes on and he says, I think he is a good candidate with flaws. I think he is a good candidate with flaws. So Wayne Grudem actually thinks he's a good candidate. So again, another assertion here that we'll see if Dr. Grudem can support. He is egotistical, bombastic, and brash. He often lacks nuance in his statements. Sometimes he blurts out mistaken ideas such as bombing the family of terrorists, and that he later must abandon. He insults people. He can be vindictive when people attack him. He has been slow to disown and rebuke the wrongful words and actions of some angry fringe supporters. He has been married 3 times and claims to have been unfaithful in his marriages. These are certainly flaws, but I do not think there are disqualifying flaws in this election. No, they're not necessarily disqualifying flaws if these were the only considerations that we had to deal with Donald Trump. I think that the inexperience and his flip-flopping on issues is an even bigger flaw, and let's see if Dr. Grudem actually addresses those. On the other hand, I think some of the accusations hurled against him are unjustified. His many years of business conduct show that he is not racist or anti-immigrant or anti-Semitic or anti-misogynistic. I think that these are unjust magnifications by a hostile press, exaggerating some careless statements he has made. I agree. I think he is deeply patriotic and sincerely wants the best for our country. He has been an unusually successful problem solver in business. Yes, he has. He has raised remarkable children, and many who have known him personally speak highly of his kindness, thoughtfulness, and generosity. But the main reason I call him a good candidate with flaws is that I think most of the policies he supports are those that will do the most good for this nation. And he goes on. Should every Christian even try to influence elections at all? Yes, definitely. The Apostle Peter says Christians are exiles on this earth. Therefore, I take seriously the prophet Jeremiah's exhortation to the Jewish people, live in exile in Babylon. Seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf. For its welfare you will find your welfare. By way of modern application, I think Christians today have a similar obligation to vote in such a way that will seek the welfare of the United States. Therefore, the one overriding question to ask is this: which vote is most likely to bring the best results for our nation? And I think that's a good question, but I think that also the question needs to be asked, if I empower one of these candidates or either of these candidates, what will be the damage that could possibly be done? I think one of the big fears that people who might be willing to vote for Donald Trump is that he would display some kind of irrational irresponsibility in respect to nuclear weapons. If you take his words seriously as to what he is saying, and if you don't write them off as just brash, over-the-top statements he's using to try for effect or some kind of rhetorical device, if you take his words seriously, you might get the conclusion that he would be willing to nuke a nation that upset him or offended him or in some way provoked him. And that is a concern. We don't really know who we have before us. We don't know is it the personal understanding of Donald Trump behind the scenes where he's kind and nice and patient, or is it this brash, braggadocious, boisterous person in front who says some pretty extreme things? That's the question we have. Grudem goes on, if this election is close, which seems likely, then if someone votes for a write-in candidate instead of voting for Trump, this election will directly help Hillary Clinton because she will need one less vote to win. Therefore, the question that Christians should ask is this: can I in good conscience act in a way that helps a liberal like Hillary win the presidency? Well, in one sense, you are voting. If you don't vote for Trump, you are, in fact, indirectly voting or helping Hillary Clinton. But then again, you can't be held directly responsible for putting someone in office that you didn't vote for. If you don't like either candidate and don't feel either candidate is qualified, by not voting for either candidate, being told, well, you're helping the liberal candidate, that is a side effect. That is an unfortunate consequential result, but you can't be held responsible for putting someone in office that you didn't vote for. And so there are all kinds of things that we have to do inconsequentially and indirectly contribute to someone that we don't want being put in office. But that's sometimes happens. And if you don't in good conscience feel that you can trust either of the candidates, then you shouldn't vote for one of them because the logic of, well, if you don't vote for this one, the other one will benefit. Well, yeah, but again, You can't make a qualified candidate out of an unqualified candidate just because the other person is even less qualified. Under President Obama, a liberal federal government has seized more and more control over our lives, but this can change. This year, we have an unusual opportunity to defeat Hillary Clinton and the pro-abortion, pro-gender confusion, anti-religious liberty, tax and spend, big government liberalism that she champions. Yes, we do. We have an opportunity. I believe that defeating that kind of liberalism would be morally right action. Therefore, I feel the force of the words of James. Whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. Yes, but that's the question, right? What is the right thing to do? And it's very difficult to know what the right thing to do is. So if you are confused and you're not quite sure what the right thing to do is, and there is no clear guidelines as to know what the right thing to do is, you certainly can't be accused of sin for not doing what you don't know to do is right. Some may feel it is easier to just stay away from the messy Trump-Clinton election and perhaps not even vote. But the teachings of Scripture do not allow us to escape moral responsibility by saying that we decided to do nothing. The prophet Obadiah rebuked the people of Edom for standing by and doing nothing to help when the Babylonians conquered Jerusalem. Oh, on that day that you stood aloof, and on that day foreigners entered the gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, and you were like one of them. That's the scripture, Obadiah 1:1. I am writing this article because I doubt that many I can't vote for Trump Christians have understood what an entirely different nation would result from Hillary Clinton as president, or have analyzed in detail how different a Trump presidency would be. In what follows, I will compare the results and we could expect from a Clinton presidency with what we could expect from a Trump presidency. And then he writes, the Supreme Court with Clinton as president. Hillary Clinton would quickly replace Judge Scalia with another liberal like Breyer, Ginsburg, Sotomayor, or Kagan. This would give liberals a 5-4 majority on the Supreme Court, even without Justice Kennedy, and the 6-3 when he votes with them. But that is not all. Justice Ginsburg is 83, and she has colon cancer and pancreatic cancer and has a heart stent. Justice Kennedy is 80. Justice Breyer is 78. President Clinton could possibly nominate 3 or 4 justices to the Supreme Court, locking in a far-left activist judiciary for perhaps 30 or more years. She could even add dozens of activist judges to federal district courts and courts of appeals, the courts where 99% of federal lawsuits are decided. Judicial tyranny of the type that we have seen when abortion rights and same-sex marriage were forced on the nation would gain a permanent triumph. The nation would no longer be ruled by the people and their elected representatives, but by unelected, unaccountable activist judges who would dictate from the bench about whatever they pleased to decree, and there would be nothing in our system of government that would or could stop them. That is a real fear. That is a real fear. And that is one reason, that is probably the most best reason why one would want to vote for Trump. Because he would not appoint the kind of judges that Hillary Clinton would appoint. And that would be probably the number one reason for voting for Trump. This is why this election is not just about Hillary Clinton. It's about defeating the far-left liberal agenda that any Democratic nominee would champion. Liberal Democrats are now within one Supreme Court justice of their highest goal, attaining permanent control of the nation with a 5-vote majority on the Supreme Court, and then relentlessly imposing every liberal policy on the nation, not through winning elections, but through a relentless parade of one Supreme Court decision after another. Even if Clinton were to drop out of the race, perhaps due to shocking email disclosures, for example, our choice in the election would be just the same, because any other Democrat nominee would appoint the same kind of liberal justices to the court. It's a good point. It's a very good point, and that is one that I am weighing carefully in my heart, that the Supreme Court justices definitely would be better under Trump than Hillary Clinton. Abortion. On abortion, a liberal court would probably find the ban on partial birth abortions to be unconstitutional. It was upheld by only a 5-4 majority in Gonzalez versus Carhart in 2007. In addition, the court would find an absolute right to abortion in the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution and then sweep away the one decision, most or all of the restrictions on abortion that pro-life advocates worked for tirelessly over the last 43 years, including ultrasound requirements, waiting periods, parental consent requirements, and prohibitions on non-doctors performing abortions. Voters should not doubt the power of the Supreme Court to abolish all these laws restricting abortion. So we're very, very aware of a Hillary Clinton presidency would definitely end probably any hope of reversing Roe v. Wade. So it would certainly, he says, be with any efforts to place legal limitations on abortions. Nobody would campaign anymore for laws to limit abortion because any such law would be unconstitutional. The legislative lobbying work of pro-life advocacy groups would be totally and utterly defeated. Millions of unborn children would continue to die. And then he goes on and he talks about religious liberties. And I agree with him there that they would definitely be better under a Trump presidency than they would be a Hillary Clinton presidency. He then goes on to talk about Christian business owners. How would they fare under a Clinton presidency? Well, they would be coerced into providing services for same-sex marriages, for example, even against their own conscience. And that would not change under a Clinton presidency. Trump is probably more sympathetic and would not rush to have those laws passed that would force Christians to go against their conscience. At least that's what he said. Christian schools and colleges, again, under a Clinton presidency, would really be in trouble because from all indications she would want to force these progressive laws, including the promotion of transgenderism and the LGBT cause, on even Christian private institutions, whereas Trump would not. He's promised that he would not. But there is some question as to whether he will actually follow through on that in some of his other statements, but he is more likely to be more sympathetic to our worldview than Hillary Clinton. There would be a threat to churches because, of course, if you're going to have a transgender LGBT revolution, which the Clintons and the liberal Democrats want, their court justices would probably coerce Christian churches even against speaking out against transgenderism and the LGBT cause, as they do. The courts in Canada have ruled against that, and Christian pastors have faced legal problems in there. Free speech, he talks about, would be better for Trump to be president, and he goes on and talks about conscience, free speech in all kinds of areas. Now, here's an interesting point that he makes. Trump has released a list of 11 judges to show the kind of nominee he would appoint to the Supreme Court. A lawyer familiar with many of these names has told me that they constitute a dream list of outstanding judges who would uphold the original meaning of the Constitution and would not create new laws from the bench. Trump has said he would rely primarily on the advice of the Federalist Society, the organization that promotes the original meaning view so strongly exemplified by Justice Scalia before his death. So, if Trump holds true to his promise to appoint only from that 11-member list, we could feel safe that he would appoint pro-life justices, and therefore the pro-life cause could continue to move forward and hopefully win at some future point. So he lists the number of advantages for voting for Donald Trump. Now, he does raise the question, how can we know that Trump won't change his mind? But Trump has changed his mind in the past, a politically minded friend said to me. How do you know that he will not do the same in the future? Maybe he'll betray you and appoint a liberal Supreme Court justice. And my reply is that we can never know the future conduct of any human being with 100% certainty, but in making an ethical decision like this one, we should base the decision on the most likely results. And in this case, the most likely result is that Trump will do most or all of what he has said. And that is true. I believe that he will do most likely what he has said. And we also can't rely on a conservative president to appoint a pro-life judge, because we know, as we all know, Ronald Reagan has appointed, when he was president, judges like Sandra Day O'Connor, who actually wound up favoring Roe v. Wade. So we really have to trust that we can try to elect presidents that will probably appoint pro-life judges and who will probably rule against abortion, but we can't really tell 100% even if we vote for a conservative. And then he goes on, talks about taxing and jobs, minorities, the military, borders, ISIS and terrorism, China and Russia, Israel, energy, executive orders, and bathrooms. Trump has promised to rescind many or most of the objectionable executive orders given by the President Obama, so we will likely end the compulsory moral degradation forced on us by the liberal agenda, including orders forcing schools to allow boys and girls bathrooms and locker rooms, in defiance of the will of the vast majority of Americans. But Hillary Clinton would likely perpetuate and expand these policies. That's true. Health care, the unprotected, and so forth. Does character matter? But are you saying that character doesn't matter? Someone might ask. I believe that character does matter, but I think Trump's character is far better than what he is portrayed by much of the current political mudslinging, and far better than his opponent's character, that is Hillary Clinton's character. In fact, if somebody makes doubts about character, the only factor to consider that is a fallacy in ethical reasoning that I call reductionism. The mistake of reducing every argument to only one factor when the situation requires that multiple factors be considered. In this election, an even larger factor is the future of the nation that would flow from a Clinton or a Trump presidency. So he considers the most likely results. The most likely result of voting for Trump is that he will govern the way he promises to do, bringing much good to the nation. Now, he says, when I look at it this way, my conscience and my considered moral judgment tell me that I must vote for Donald Trump as the candidate who is most likely to do the most good for the United States. So that is the article. And I would say that is a strong case that if you can get over the idea that Trump, even though he lacks any political experience at all, that he has no proven record of working together with people in a non-profit organization or a government or social organization, if you can believe that he could possibly come through on what he says he will do, and if you can believe that he will not do anything that would trigger some kind of a war by any of his words or actions, if you could trust him that he would behave himself, then voting for Donald Trump would be a good alternative. But if you can't get over those hurdles, I can see very well why Christians could, in fact, sit this election out and say, look, I cannot vote for anybody in good conscience. There's a lot to think about here, and I hope you all do think about these deeply, and I pray that God will lead you in the wise decision as to how to vote for the presidential elections come November. This is Jeff Short. God bless you. We'll see you back here next week on another edition of Christian Answers. God bless.